All right, so welcome to Real Talk Basketball. Very, very excited today to have Stan Van Gundy come back and talk. We talked in pretty big detail about his journey in basketball. This will be a little bit more about what's been going on with him, this year. He made some moves going from ESPN to TNT. Obviously, I think people know, anyone that knows me, I reference Stan a lot. He had a big impact on me as a coach. Wish I had met him or worked for him a lot earlier. I might have been able to keep my job because my teams were so bad defensively when I was in San Francisco. So he really helped me on that side of the ball in a lot of ways, just an organization standpoint. So Stan, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So let's get right to it. So you made a change, right? You made a change this year. You went from ESPN to TNT. How did all of that come about? That you decided to make a little bit of a change?
Well, I enjoyed my time at ESPN, but I was sort of a, the 11th man on a team sort of thing. I was the guy, like, stay ready, but you're not really in our rotation, and so I didn't have an ongoing role there. They need somebody to, talk some basketball on the morning shows, go up to New York for a day or two. And then, at the time, their studio show, I even forget what it's called now, but ESPN on game nights and stuff was done in LA, and it was Chauncey Billups and Jalen Rose, Paul Pierce, Michelle Beadle. And I was like, oh, Chauncey can't make it on this night, or Jalen can't make it on this night. And I would come in, and that was fine. I enjoyed it. But, they didn't really have a role for me. And then NBA TV and TNT, which are operated under the same umbrella, they came to me in the off season and, through my agent, and had an actual role, where I'd work in the studio at NBA TV, which was in Atlanta, a lot easier trip than New York or certainly California. And then when you got after the first of the year and TNT started doing Tuesday night national games, that I'd be doing those. So a chance to have a real role and a chance to, work games was really the big thing. But I love the NBA TV because you go up there, particularly, I was working Friday and Saturday, and particularly on Fridays, they have a lot of different shows going on a lot of different formats. And so, Quentin Richardson was up there. He and Caron Butler, both guys that I had coached, were, doing the bounce on those nights. And then Sam Mitchell, Steve Smith, Sekou Smith. It was all basketball people. And so before and after and at breaks, you're sitting around with basketball people, which are the people I enjoyed being with. And, talking basketball, telling stories, having fun. And so that part of it was great too. And then I got to do games on top of it with a great guy, with, Ian Eagle, who's, who is just fantastic, and took me under his wing and taught me a lot, mentored me, coached me, and helped me through, because I don't have experience doing it at the NBA level. And so there were a lot of reasons for it. But NBA TV and Turner, I mean, you couldn't work for better people. Like, I want to coach, but that's not totally my choice. Like, I don't get the choice. The teams get the choice. So if I'm not coaching, I don't think there's anything better I could be doing, or anyone better I could be working for than these people. I mean, they're great.
What two things, like what were two adjustments or things that Ian taught you that you didn't know about? I've tried to dabble in TV in the past, and obviously nothing near that level, but what were two things that Ian kind of helped you with that sticks out in your head?
All right, now don't piss him off, because it's Ian Eagle.
Okay, Ian. My bad, Ian. You know how good I am with names, Stan.
Don't piss him off. There were a lot of things, but one of the ones that really, really stuck with me was, he would tell me, don't bury the lead. So in other words, make sure, because you don't have that long to talk while the game's going on. So don't a lot of times I would try to like, I'm going to make these points and lead up to my major point. And he was like, no, you got to go the other way. You got to make your point, and then whatever time you've got left, support the point, but don't bury the lead. Right. I thought that one was probably the biggest point he made to me that helped me, and I also learned to get in and out and, let the play-by-play guy, let Ian make the call and, not interfere with that. The tough one is if there's a great play, right. Because you spontaneously react, you're like, oh, somebody right. made a great, well, that's his call. Right. You got to sit there. And then when he's done making the call, then you can say whatever you had to say. I had trouble with that a couple of times, not often, but once or twice a game when you'd be like, oh, great pass. Well, it's not my call, and so, but he was patient with me, man. He's been at it a long time. And you know what I really learned from him, probably more than the broadcasting, not learned it because you know it anyway, but he's exactly what you'd want in your best player on a basketball team, because he wasn't trying to fight for spotlight. He was trying to make me better. Right. That's what he was trying to do. He was trying to make me look good. Like one of the points he made to me, because he's always concerned about the whole team. Like he really has an idea. And there was one game we were doing, and, they went to a replay and, on a call. And so they went to a replay, and I said, that's not a good angle. I can't tell, from there. On the air, I said that. And, so he said to me, he knew I didn't mean anything bad by it, but what he taught me is, he said, when you say that, you make the camera guys look bad. They don't feel good about what they're doing. He always has that stuff in his mind. And, having been around teams my whole life, you don't really think of somebody like him being part of a team, but he is. And he is trying to make everybody else look good. And so I learned bigger things from him than just the broadcasting too. And I think that's why he's had the success that he's had. His Nets thing this year was voted the best local broadcast in the league. And Richard Jefferson, the other people who do color out there, Ryan Rucco, who does the games, Ian does. I mean, they'll all say the same thing. Like Ian has tried to make everybody else better because that makes the broadcast better. Right. If they all, same thing we talk about with our teams all the time, that if we're good enough and we win, everyone will reap the rewards. He's doing the same thing. I mean, he's like the coach of a broadcast, and very impressive guy. Plus, takes his job really seriously, but doesn't take himself real seriously. And I think that's a good attribute for just about anybody in any job.
Yeah. What about the prep? I've talked in the past about your prep as a head coach for games. How different was it? How much time did you invest in it? Did you enjoy that part? And just seeing other teams, whether you went to practice or you just watched them in the game, that you enjoyed.
Well, I liked it because it gave me something to actually focus on, rather than just sort of watching the games for no reason. Particularly when we were broadcasting games, I would try to watch 4 or 5 games of both teams, before we got there, to get an idea of, their defensive schemes, how they played things. By the time we got to them, most of those teams had played each other before. So how they played each other the first time, you could really focus in. And it was great for me because then I'd see something I'd like and I'd make a basketball note. And, oh, that's a great out of bounds play. Oh, I like that set after timeouts, But it also got you prepared to be able to say, well, one of the things I really like about timeouts, after timeouts, is they like to look for, so and so off a flare screen, and so it helped you prepare. And I think just knowing, sort of have an idea what might come, what both their problems and their strengths are, you're not just reacting. Like, I can't imagine just going in there blindly and doing a game. I mean, you
Right.
could do it, but I'm not so sure. And then I took a lot of time looking at the statistics and everything else, and sort of where the teams were trending. And then also, you had questions to ask, I hope pertinent questions to ask the coaches leading into games, before the game, saying, hey, I've noticed in the last few games, you guys have changed your rotation a little bit. Like, what was the thinking there? And so I think it helped there. The harder preparation was actually for the studio, because, on some nights, I mean, we had nights where you're going to talk about 12 games.
Right.
Now, not as in depth or for as long, but you had to have, or at least I felt like you had to have, some idea of what was going on with those teams, where they're trending, what their problems have been, what's been going well. This team's been winning, why, and trying to prepare for all of those. It took me a little while to get into a routine, but the fun part for me, and what the NBA TV part did, is I followed the league closely, because 2 nights a week I was going to have to comment on virtually every team in the league at some point. So you had to know what was going on with everybody. So I felt like I followed the league better than I did a year ago, when, even though I was in the studio then, you were in the studio when they had games on TV. NBA TV, a lot of times you're in there. Some nights they have games, but a lot of nights there's no game on. You're just talking about everything around the league. So I like that part. I thought at the beginning, I was more interested in just doing the games, and I wasn't sure that I would like that part, but I loved what it did in making me follow the league.
When you look at, because I know you also look at the numbers, but you're not an analytics guy per se. I've heard you go back and forth. Like, do you use the numbers to validate what you see? I think some guys say you can't just look at the numbers, but you do a great job of knowing the numbers, but also watching the games. Like, you feel like coaches, you need to have both. Some guys are just hey, this is what I saw, this is what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, but I think especially this year, sort of what I would do is, you would look at the numbers, like Milwaukee's unbelievable defensive numbers. And so you would look at those, and then you would watch them play and say, okay, how are they getting to those numbers?
Right.
And likewise, if a team was struggling, on one end of the floor, boy, they're really struggling on offense, and you could watch them and say, well, why? What's going on? And so, that's, to me, what I tried to do analyzing things, is sort of start with the numbers to see where they are, the standings, and where they rank in all these things, and then see how they got there. And we had this series on NBA TV, and then they would send it out online, called Coach Speak. And so they would give me a team to do, and they would end up being about a 5-minute thing. And now, I could focus on whatever 3 or 4 areas, now I have no idea, like, in terms of what viewers thought, or if anybody watched them or any of that. But for me, it was fun, because you really did, like, sort of analyze what teams are doing. Like, with the Raptors, we went and did their changing defenses, because they do a lot of stuff, triangle and 2, box and 1, diamond and 1. They'll blitz, pick and rolls. They do a lot of different stuff. And we showed a West Coast trip where they played extremely well against good teams, and all the different things that Nick Nurse did. With the Clippers, we showed, the main parts, or at least a few of the main parts, of Doc Rivers' playbook, of how he was trying to use Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So I loved doing stuff like that. And so I started with the numbers, tried to watch them on film to see why. And if nothing else, for me, it was a good learning experience, and it gave me a chance to watch more different teams.
Right. Are there any, like, from a coaching standpoint, or even from a fan standpoint, right? Are there any teams, players, styles of play that you like? This is what I enjoy watching.
Yeah, I mean, I love watching Milwaukee at both ends of the floor. I think that Mike Budenholzer, number one, everything he does is really sound in terms of the analytics. If you want to get to that, I mean, they're trying to take away free throws and layups and and second shots primarily, and they're willing to give up some threes in an age where most people are focused on the three. But I think Mike understands like those other shots are more efficient than the three, right? And then on offense, they use the three to space the floor, and they ended up shooting a lot of them, but they're always on the attack first. They'll shoot some transition threes, but once they're into sort of their half court offense, they're not they're not coming down and jacking. They're seeing if they can get something putting pressure on the basket and then playing with the game out. So I loved them. I really enjoyed watching the development of Memphis, and Taylor Jenkins, who I don't know at all, is a Budenholzer assistant that came over, and watching him get his style of play in early in the year, where they were playing a lot like Milwaukee, but having almost no success at the defensive end of the floor. He had a young team, and they couldn't stop anybody. They were exciting to watch offensively. Ja Morant, to me, is going to be a great star. They were great to watch. And then all of a sudden, they're getting better and better defensively. And over about the last month, maybe even longer, they were a top 10 defensive team, And so I enjoyed watching them. Love Dallas. I mean, mainly because of Luka Doncic, but Rick Carlisle's a really, really good offensive coach. They had a lot of shooting on the floor and played the game really unselfishly. So I thought from an offensive standpoint, they were fun to watch, as was New Orleans. I mean, I think David Griffin, another guy I don't really know. So I'm not just touting guys that I know. I don't really know him at all. I thought he did a tremendous job putting together a great roster when he had to trade Anthony Davis and getting talent back and getting picked and then going out with free agents and stuff. And he has a great mix of really promising young talent and some really solid veteran guys who are both high character guys. Drew Holiday, JJ Redick, Derek Favors, Etuan Moore, but also good productive players. I've never bought into the guy sitting at your end of your bench, a veteran who's can't play anymore, that he's going to have much impact on guys. Right. And then the young guys that he had, they were a lot of fun to watch offensively. They played really fast. Alvin Gentry's always been a really good offensive coach. I think mixes giving players a lot of freedom with some really solid principles in terms of their spacing and things, and giving guys confidence. So I really like them. Utah's another team I really, really enjoyed. And then I enjoyed watching coaching stuff, watching how some guys have evolved. And I'll give one example. Frank Vogel, who, was in Indiana for a long time and then had 2 horrendous years in Orlando, got another shot with a good team. And I coached against Frank a lot, so I'd seen him, and he made 2 changes to things that he had never done before. Like, he started running out on jump shots. They would contest and run out. Right. And Frank before had always been, just like I had been, a real possession guy. We're going to hopefully limit layups and make it tough on you, and then we're going to rebound with 5 guys. But he realized that, a lot of times he had Anthony Davis out on the perimeter on a switch or something and guarding a shooter. And he would run out, and he had the best passer in the game, in LeBron James. And he would literally go post under the rim.
Right.
And then, boom, the ball would go down. I mean, he's throwing 75-foot passes at Anthony Davis. So you got a guard back who's trying to play him, and he would just throw it. And Anthony Davis, it's like football players going to a big wide receiver against a little defensive back. They just go up in the air and get it and score, get fouled, whatever. And so, Frank made that change.
Right.
And then he also sort of bucked tradition in the NBA, and he wanted to post up a little, but maintain a flow. So what he did was, after every free throw, he posted up either LeBron James or Anthony Davis. After every single free throw, like you knew it was coming, he was going to post them up. And then finally, I said two things, but the third thing he did that I thought was really interesting from a coaching standpoint is he got ready to play either big or small at the end of the game. And so what he did is he started JaVale McGee at center and Anthony Davis at the 4. And then he'd get down 7 or 8 minutes into the first quarter, and he would sub JaVale McGee out with Kyle Kuzma, and he'd move Anthony Davis to the 5. So he didn't bring Dwight Howard in right away.
Right.
And then Dwight Howard would start the second quarter for Anthony Davis. Well, so because of that, right off the bat in the first quarter, Anthony Davis had played both the 5 and the 4. Every single game. Same thing in the third quarter. So coming down the stretch, they had played both in the game. So it wasn't like, we've played small the whole game and now, oh shit, we got to play big.
Right.
And you're not in. No, he had played both all the way down. And so when he got to the last 6 to 8 minutes of the game, they were ready to play either way. I thought he just did some remarkable coaching things, subtle, nothing, not that he had some unguardable set or anything else. He had really good players. He got them to defend, but he took advantage of his personnel and showed some flexibility in the way he approached things. I thought it was maybe even better than what he did in Indiana as far as a coaching job.
Yeah. So you obviously watched the game in pretty good detail. What are you doing now? Like, we got this COVID-19. I see you on clinics. I see you talking. I see you listening. What are you doing to kind of fill your day? Because you're going back into Synergy and watching old games. What are you doing to keep yourself busy right now?
I have watched a few old things, but not as many. But what I've done, it's been good because with all the coaches at every level shut down,
right,
guys now, and not just shut down from basketball, like college coaches can't go out recruiting. Everybody's sheltered in place. And so even though they're doing other things and they're in touch with their players and everything, they have time now to talk basketball. And that really doesn't happen much. College guys, there's never a time that recruiting stops. And with the new rules, you're basically working with your players year round. So you don't really have a lot of time to, at least not on a weekly basis, to schedule time to sit down and talk basketball. You might find a few days in a month to do it, whatever. And the NBA guys, you go from the season to the playoffs to the draft to free agency to summer league to, holy crap, I should spend a little bit of time maybe with my family in August. Right. And then you're back at work, And so now people have all this downtime and guys want to use it and share information. And it's been good for me because, it gives me, I haven't coached for 2 years. So you don't have a staff that you're talking basketball with every day. You're preparing for games on your own, but this is the first chance really in 2 years to sit down with guys and talk X's and O's and talk coaching and the whole thing. And I'm not coaching right now, so I'm not limited in who I can talk to. It's like you're coaching as an NBA head coach. You're not you're not going to get on a call, with somebody else you're coaching against, particularly in your own conference and things like that. You're not going to do that. College coaches aren't going to get in with guys on their own league. So I can get in on all those groups because I don't have a job right now. And so I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. And I just love hearing other guys talk and their perspective, but I haven't been on one call or something where, I haven't taken a lot away from it. I mean, I'm a big note taker anyway, and I haven't been on one where, I haven't come away with some things that I can use if I get another opportunity.
And you don't discriminate. Like, so you sent me, I listened to Lenny a Cuff, right? I listened to Lenny and I took my notes, and then you actually sent an email with some thing. And I looked at mine. I had about a page and a half. Like, you went into detail, right? With a guy that's a Division I coach, great Division II coach, first year. I want to say he's at Lipscomb, right? And it was just a certain level. Where did that come from? I know your dad, everyone knows your father. Anyone in coaching circles, I was talking to Dave Bullwinkle, who said to say hello, by the way. And he was talking about his time. Where did that level of detail come, even in note-taking because I've been around you, the game at a high level, but you don't discriminate. You don't care. There's something, you feel like someone's got something to give you, right? You're going to take notes in high detail.
Yeah, first of all, I think we all learn and retain information differently, and some people, they've got to see it or they've got to talk it through or whatever. For me, I'm going to remember most everything that I write down. And if I don't write it, and I can't type it in. I can go back and type it in, but it doesn't do the same thing. I figured that out from my memory. Like, if I sit there and take notes, like I'll see kids do that in college classes. That wouldn't work for me. Right. If I write it, I'm going to remember it. And so when somebody's talking, I like to write down notes, and then I'll go back and sort of pick and choose. But that's sort of the way I get through things. And, I'm not going to write down everything that's said, but I write down everything that I find meaningful that I want to remember. And that ends up being a lot of what people say because I'm listening to really good, smart people. And so, yeah, a lot of it. And I've never been one that, gave more credibility to someone based on level of play or anything else. I think just through my own experiences, both growing up around coaches because of my dad, and then having coached at the Division III level in college, Division II, low Division I, on up. And then into the NBA, there's guys that I coached against Division III that are every bit as good as guys I coached against in the NBA. Just the opportunities have been different. And there are there's some subtle things where there's some different skills that help you on different levels. Like, I think I fit better as an NBA coach than as a college coach. But you can learn from guys at all levels. So I sort of learned early on, I think, at least what I try to do is just evaluate the information and not worry as much like, hey, if Greg Popovich says it, it's true. And you have to stay with it. And if Rick Croy at Cal Baptist University, which most people have never heard of, says it, you give it less credibility. And in a lot of cases, those guys have less help and are having to figure out stuff on their own, and they're in difficult situations and the whole thing. And so, I've been able to learn from a lot of different people, and I enjoy that.
Yeah. Have you been watching The Last Dance? I know you were kind of breaking in the league. I want to say maybe early 90s. You kind of got involved with the Heat. Talk about that. Talk about what you took away, or if anything, from The Last Dance in the first 4 episodes.
Yeah, I've watched it. I came in the league as an assistant in 95, right? So 95, 96 season. So that was the first of the second,
Right.
the first year of the second 3-year run. Right. So Jordan had come back at the end of the previous year. Now he was back full time and the whole time. So first of all, it's not like I've enjoyed watching it. I don't celebrate it. I mean, because we couldn't beat them. We couldn't beat them. So it wasn't, it's not like fun, like, oh, wow, man, this is great. No, I mean, no, we couldn't get by them. And I mean, my first year in the league, they swept us in the first round of the playoffs and then beat the Knicks where my brother was in the next round of the playoffs. Yeah, that's not fun. I mean, it's not fun. But I do like, the stories and getting some of the backstory on things. I don't, it's all it's from somebody's point of view. I don't take anything, as just total fact in the whole thing. But it's interesting to hear those guys talk about it and to get their viewpoints, on Sunday night. And they went back to the Pistons Chicago rivalry and to hear Michael Jordan's take on it and Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen, but then also to hear Isaiah Thomas's view on it. And then both coaches, so I just find it really interesting TV to watch. So yeah, I've enjoyed it, but not celebrating.
So you've gone on record, LBJ and Michael Jordan, talk a little bit about that and why you feel the way that you felt. I saw it on ESPN. Everyone wants to talk about it. I'd love to hear your take as to, the LeBron James, Michael Jordan comparison.
Well, so first of all, in most of those kind of arguments in any sport, what I'll usually start with is you go ahead and pick who you want. And I'll be very happy with second choice. Like, LeBron, Michael, okay, who do I get? I get one of them? That's good. Because a lot of times you get like 20th choice, and then you got to go out and beat those guys. So I'll take either one.
Yeah.
But I have said that I think LeBron to this point is the best player in the history of the league, at least among perimeter guys. Somehow the big guys always get left out. But among the perimeter guys, and look, to me, the first part of it is really simple. Like, players have just continued to get better over the years. Like, that's evolution. That's what it is. Players get better. So, like, people are trying to compare the Bulls teams with players today. No, they would not win a championship today. They would not. They would not win any. Not in my opinion. The players are better now. Right. They're better. That's not to demean anything they did. And Michael Jordan would still be a great player now. Don't get me wrong. Right. But I look at them and I'm saying similar positions. Look how much bigger LeBron James is. Look how much faster LeBron James is. I mean, the game has changed. Like one of the things that jumps out to me is when you turn it on is you go, oh my gosh. I mean, look at the bodies on these guys. I mean, the players are better. Now, there are some things that argue for Michael Jordan on the other side. I do think, in fairness, the game was a lot more physical then. Not necessarily early on in his career. Like, you look at some of those scores and you're going like, is anybody guarding anybody at that time? But it certainly as he got into the mid-90s, like they're talking about how the Pistons shut him down and the Jordan rules and the whole thing. And I'm like, let me go back and look that up. The year before Chicago finally won, and he averaged just under 30 points a game in that series. And to put that in perspective, not a single game in that 6 games did the two teams combine for 200 points. Right. So he's getting now in nothing. And that is supposedly a team that locked him down. Right. With the Jordan rule. And so my brother has said, and this is a fair point, what would Michael Jordan do with today's rules where you can't hand check anybody, can't have any contact? and there's more space on the floor because everybody plays more shooting.
Right.
That the one thing in Last Dance the other night, they're showing, a game where, they had made the point to Phil Jackson had made the point to Michael, who's open?
Right.
Paxson's open, throwing the ball. And they're talking about how many shots he made. Well, you watch him, he's stepping in, making 18-footers,
Yeah.
which is great.
Right.
But now those would all be threes.
Yeah.
And Michael Jordan would get correspondingly more room.
Right.
But my argument for LeBron is not that he would score at the level of Michael Jordan, or maybe even Kobe Bryant. I think those guys are better scorers. I think Kevin Durant's a better scorer than LeBron James. But I think LeBron being a true point guard at that
right.
size and being able to make plays. And I think for a good part of LeBron James' career, we forget some of the teams he carried to outstanding records, and into the finals, like in 2007. I mean, until he got to Miami, I mean, he's not playing with another Hall of Famer.
Right.
And yet he's carrying teams to 60 plus wins and going to the finals and making some of those guys look pretty darn good. Right. And he was a first team all defensive guy. His defense has dropped a little bit with age, but man, I mean, so I would give him we're talking guys like that. I mean, you're talking about, I'm giving him that much of an edge. And a lot of it is because it's 20 years later and the game's 20 years, the players are 20 years better than they were then. It doesn't mean that the stars from then wouldn't be able to play now, but the stars now are playing against better other players right. than the stars then were. Like I don't want to mention any names and demean anybody from the 90s, but right. there's some of those guys I'm watching play big roles on good teams that I'm saying, that dude's a 12th man now. Yeah, he's a 12th man. He's not getting off the bench for anybody now, and so I give LeBron a slight edge, but slight, and certainly not to demean Michael Jordan at all.
Well, like the last time you on this show, they took a sound bite and they ran with it. So you're probably going to get another one again.
Yeah, so, but I've tried to clarify it here. And here's the thing, like, if it's just a battle on numbers and stuff like that, like to me among perimeter players, I've always said, because he was my guy growing up, that Oscar Robertson has to be in there. At the end of 5 years in the NBA, Oscar Robertson was averaging 30, 10, and 10 after 5 years.
Right.
Like I loved Oscar at one point while Jason Kidd was in his prime. They interviewed Oscar Robertson at one point, and he said, "Hey, if I would have known that triple doubles were a big thing, I would have just gotten one every night." And he probably would have. He was certainly, if you average 30, 10, and 10 for 5 years, you're certainly capable of doing it for a long time.
Yeah. So
the only real argument against Oscar, to me, not being the greatest player of all time is, well, players are a lot better now. And they are.
Right.
And they are. Well, you can't use that argument to put Michael Jordan above Oscar Robertson. Right. And then not use the same argument to put LeBron James ahead of Michael Jordan.
Yeah. All right. What do you think? NBA going to start back up? What are the issues with that? There's a lot, right? Like, what's your gut on an NBA restart to finish this season?
I don't have any idea. I mean, it's so complicated. Yeah. I think people don't understand how complicated it is. I mean, first thing is, all the states are going to reopen at different times. So, what do you do? So Georgia's opened up. So Atlanta's guys can go into their facilities. I anticipate Florida's going to open up fairly soon, but Illinois may not. And, California may not. Like, where's the fairness there?
Right.
And then, how much do you open up? I mean, right now they're saying they can go in and use the facility, but they've laid out some pretty specific rules. I mean, it's going to be one guy at a basket right. with somebody rebounding, Well, that's a long way from playing. And so how do you get from there to letting guys work against each other, going 5-on-5, to then playing games, which even if it's with no fans, I don't know what you're talking, 100, 150 people it takes.
Yeah.
And then what people don't understand is what Adam Silver and the league and the teams have to be ready for is, okay, you open back up based on the numbers. Now, what do you do when another guy tests positive for the coronavirus? And now you've got to, by the rules I've been reading, now you got to quarantine his team and anybody he's played against for 14 days. How do you run a schedule like that? Yeah, no, you're not playing them now because you have to be ready. And maybe you don't have to, but it would seem you would, and whatever you decide to do. Adam Silver and the league and the teams, they not only have to have a plan for reopening, they have to have a plan. What are we going to do when the first player tests positive, and even more, the second, third, fourth players? What are we doing? And are we better off reopening like they did in Japan and then having to shut down again? Or are we better off just waiting until we decide we're going to go forward, which could be a long, long time? So it's way too complicated for me to figure that out. I do know this. Adam Silver's a really sharp guy, and he's got a lot of good people in the NBA office, and they're talking about this stuff every single day. And I don't think that you'll see a reopening until they have answers to those questions, you know. I thought the thing of, like, we're going to go to one place and quarantine all the players, that one sort of made me laugh. I mean, unless you're just going to start with 4 teams and get it over in a couple of weeks. Like first of all, are guys going to say, yeah, like we're going to go quarantine for 2 months? I'm going to go from my hotel room and play basketball, and that's it. And then they said, well, you know, they could have their families there with them. I'm thinking, okay, that'll work well. You got little kids who now don't even have a backyard or anything. You're just going to put them in well, they'll have nice suites. Hey, come on, man. And then the second thing is, like, I've been around the NBA for a long time. If you think all those guys are just going to abide by that and not like they're saying, go to Vegas. Oh, yeah. No, those guys aren't going to sneak out of their rooms and go out and try to meet other people. And you know, no, they're not going to do that. And you only need a few other people doing it. Now you're bringing it back into the whole group. And even if they would agree to do all that, okay, who's serving them food? Are you quarantining those people? You're going to tell somebody that's making minimum wage they can't go home at night? You know, and so they could be bringing it in. I mean, it is, to me, an incredibly complex issue that I can't imagine trying to make that decision. And, you know, you've got all these players who don't want to lose their money, which I understand, and the owners don't want to lose their money. And so you want to bring it back. You want to help all those people, but you've got all these other issues to consider. I mean, Adam Silver, I don't care how much money he's making, he's underpaid right now. Maybe not all the time, but right now he's underpaid.
Yeah. Do you have any take on the G League developmental team? Have you thought about that and how that's going to change the landscape of college basketball? You know, college basketball's got now they might be doing the whole transfer and play right away. What are your takes on those two topics?
Well, I don't think the G League will have that much. The G League thing will have that much impact on the college game. I really don't. I mean, you're talking so few guys. What have we got? 3 right now decided to do it. If they really ramp it up, what are they going to have? 10 or 12 guys. You have 300 Division I teams. You're going to take 10 or 12 guys out of the mix, and you're taking them out coming out of high school. So even for the fans, I don't even know who those guys are yet. I mean, some fans follow the recruiting stuff, but not everybody. So the majority of fans, like let's say it was a year ago and Zion Williamson was removed from the mix. Well, the majority of fans, okay, who's he? You know, you don't know. It's not like, oh, wow, they took what's a kid, Green, he's not going to play in college next year. I'm not going to watch. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I don't think it affects college at all. What'll be interesting is if it actually is a good development, experience for these guys, because they're not playing in real games. They're going to play like 10 or 12 games, which seems like nothing to me. And they're exhibitions that mean nothing in terms of winning and losing and everything else. And so that to me is the question. And as far as the transfer stuff, it makes it really tough on college coaches. I don't know necessarily that it's great for players or the game, but to me, it's just basic fairness. Like, yeah, I mean, they should be able to. And to me, it's not a one-time thing. If you want to transfer every year, to me, you should be able to. Like, why not? Every other student can. Right. Like, why shouldn't they be able to? Like, well, then if somebody's good, they're going to move up. Oh, you mean like the coaches do?
Right.
Like, yeah, like that's what happens with coaches. Do they have to sit out a year?
Yeah.
So coach, yeah, well, you can hire so-and-so from, wherever to move, but he's got to sit a year now. I don't know any coaches who are in favor of that. To me, it's basic fairness. Like, they should be able to go whatever. And if they transfer 4 times, they transfer 4 times. And that's the way it goes. I understand how hard it makes it on coaches. And I don't think it's good for players, because I do think, instead of just always looking for greener pastures, like learning to stick it out and make it better is probably a good lesson. But I think coaches just have to approach it differently now. Like, I don't think you can approach it like you used to. Like, you were at San Francisco and, you approached it as building a program. And now I think you've got to look at it more of each season's just its own deal. Like, we don't have any idea. Like, I'm not developing this guy for next year because I have no idea if he's coming back. Right. If he's not playing enough, he's leaving. If he's playing a lot at a place like San Francisco, he's looking to move up.
Right.
I mean, so yeah, you have no idea. So just coach your team from, whenever you start with them in that summer or whatever, through the next season, and then start it all over again. Right. Like, you can't act like it's a 4-year process. And I understand that's harder, but that's just the landscape. And the players, to me, yeah, they deserve the right to move.
How do you think that's going to affect the NBA? So, like, when I was like Chris Webber in like '93, Chris Webber, they go to the Final Four, he's the #1 pick in the draft. Everyone's like, yeah, he's the best player, right? Like, now these kids, some people might say, like, they haven't proven they can win at that level. Well, now we're going to get them. We've got 2 or 4 year contract. How do you think that affects those teams? Like, the league is getting younger. You don't have as many of the veteran guys anymore. How does that affect coaching, right? Because you got guys that are a little bit unproven, a little bit younger. Even Kobe was saying, when I was in the Lakers, I never went out with the guys. I was 19 years old. I couldn't do anything. How does that affect the league?
Well, I mean, it's made it harder for sure. But not as hard as it was when they were coming right out of high school, which I think we'll go back to pretty soon. But it's always, the less information you have, the harder the evaluation is. So I don't think there's any doubt about that. But everybody's on equal ground in that regard. And to me, again, I go back to the other side of sort of what's fair. And anybody else at 18 years old can go work in any profession they want. And in other sports, and they can do the same thing, and then all of a sudden we're saying, no, kids need 1 year after high school before they, well, why? I don't understand the fairness of that. And if they're ready, and the teams will determine that, they should be able to take them. And it's really interesting to me. I've always been sort of fascinated by fans' reaction to that. Fans hate it. They don't even like the one and done. And they hated it when kids came out of high school to the NBA. Right. Like, how bad it was for the game, how bad it was for the kids and the whole thing. But baseball's been doing it for years. Right. Hockey's been doing it for years. Nobody ever complains. Right. And now those kids are coming out of high school to go to the minor leagues and make like $200 a month, and everybody's good with that decision. But if a kid comes out of high school like a Dwight Howard and can make millions of dollars, that's bad for the game. What? I hate to say it. Actually, I don't hate to say it because I think it needs to be said. To me, it's a racial thing. Right. It really is. Like, the kids coming out in baseball and hockey are primarily, white kids. Right. And so I think people go off. They want to go work and they're not making a lot of money. Right. So that's the other part. It's not all racial. They want to go play for $500 a month instead of going to college. Fine. Yeah. What, they get millions of bucks? They never even went to college. This black kid's going to get millions of bucks. Yeah. Screw that. This isn't right. And they react to it. And to me, the basketball guys, at least the ones who actually get drafted, are making better decisions than the baseball and hockey guys are. And yet the fans react to it differently. So to me, it's just straight fairness. Like, if Bill Gates can leave college, and he did okay. Yeah, he did all right. He did all right. It worked out for him. If he can do that, then why can't LeBron James come out of high school and go to the NBA? And the other thing is, quite honestly, like, what's college all about? Can we get back to that for some reason? Like, colleges came about as institutions of higher learning. It was about education. And so what we should be concerned about is kids going to school who want an education. It's fine if you don't. Like, it's not for everybody. That's fine. So let them go to work, whether it's in basketball, baseball, construction, or whatever. If you don't want to go to college, don't. But the kids who go to college should at the least want an education. And right now, what we're doing with the one and done rule is we're forcing a lot of kids, or we were anyway, forcing a lot of kids to go to college who really didn't have any interest in college or the education. It's just, that's the only place you've left me to go to play basketball. And so I think we've got to get out of that situation. I think it'll be better for the colleges, better for the players, and I don't think it'll hurt college basketball. At least college is different, right? The NBA, you're turning it on to watch certain players. Like, I'm turning it on. I want to watch LeBron James. I want to watch Zion Williamson. Whatever. In college, people are turning it on to watch Duke play North Carolina. Right. They're turning it on to watch Kansas play Kansas State. Right. I don't care who you put on those teams. If I was playing on one of those teams, they'd turn it on. I mean, it's that atmosphere, that's what they're turning it on to watch. Like Zion Williamson was there at Duke and everybody loved it. And he went to the NBA, and my guess is they sold out every game this year. Yeah. And my guess is, if we have college basketball next year, they'll sell out every game next year. That's where it is. It's different. It's not going to hurt the game.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take up too much time. I miss these, right? The staff meetings at 8 o'clock were always fun for me because every once in a while. Yeah. Me too. So, hopefully we're not doing this again in a year or whenever. I absolutely, how I feel about you, and I appreciate you taking the time, right, to spend an hour. Hopefully this doesn't end up on some front page of ESPN or whatever because of what you said. But no, you know how I feel about you. I really appreciate you coming on, Stan. It means a lot, and I'll probably be seeing your square on some clinic.
You certainly will. Yes, you will.
That's right. But tell everyone I said hello. Really appreciate you, my man.